them being here also. I submitted the traffic calming application and went through the board with it. We all discussed it, talked about it, signed off on it and all that. And we have from NDOT, these lovely people right here who are going to present their recommendation and talk to you about what NDOT will recommend and how it will proceed from there. So I just want to thank you for being here and welcome.
Great. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is David Greaves. We are actually consultants who work for Kinley Horn. We are working on behalf of NDOT with their traffic calming program.
And I'm Liz Tufnell. I also work with David and working for NDOT, and I will be monitoring the chat room tonight. We've already got a few people that joined, so whenever anyone has a question in there, I'm going to address that and ask David so all of us can hear it.
Yeah, so we can go ahead and get started. As a reminder, we're here to talk about Percy Warner Boulevard and Vaughn's Gap Road. I'm sure you all are familiar with the kind of two main routes that traverse between the highways and up toward town. For those online, we are gathered here in person at the Gordon Jewish Community Center. And then, as Liz explained, we have a virtual meeting that people are also able to attend. Lastly, we're recording this meeting, so if anyone is not available at the moment, we can direct them to the link that will be posted on NDOT's YouTube channel, and then they can get the same information that we're discussing here tonight. So we're going to just do a quick overview about what the traffic calming program is, how it works, what options are available to us, and then move on to more specifics about your streets. So the Nashville Street Traffic Calming Program, that's NSTC, as we'll see abbreviated here several times, really focuses on residential streets. So there are larger roads, Highway 70, Highway 100. Those are not ones that we're focusing on because they're really designed to move cars at high volumes and higher speeds. The traffic calming program seeks to take streets that people live on and really encourage drivers to go at speeds that are safe for areas where you might find people walking around, just living lives. So the 3 E's of traffic calming are education. That's what we're doing here tonight. We can also walk around, educate our neighbors, take the information we learned today and explain kind of what's going on if anyone isn't available here. There's enforcement. So this is generally up to the Metro Police Department. NDOT can't write speeding tickets or issue fines, anything like that. So it's one of the E's, but it's not really something that we're able to control a whole lot. And then finally, engineering. That's really the big one that we are here to try to implement because it is sort of the one tool in our tool belt that we can, guarantee is totally under NDOT's jurisdiction and is shown to work well at achieving the goals that we're shooting for. Speaking of which, this whole program really is motivated by safety. So Nashville has adopted the Vision Zero goal. That means 0 traffic fatalities on our roads. That's quite a tall order, but we are shooting for it and doing everything we can to get there. The reason we focus so much on speed reduction is because the difference in survivability of a collision with a pedestrian drastically decreases as speeds go up. So this infographic here sort of shows the odds of survival a person has if they were struck by a car traveling at 25 miles an hour. That's that 89% off on the left. Still not great, but pretty good chances, if you were really in trouble there. But as you get up to the 45 mile an hour range, that chance really becomes, untenable. So that's why we're shooting for that 20 mile an hour range on our residential streets, because it is somewhere where people like to walk around, put their garbage out, things like that. So this is a very, very popular program. As of February in 2023, we've had 464 applications submitted. We're actually already working on the next round. I don't know if we have the total for the next cycle yet, or do we?
Yeah, it's 102.
Wow. So adding 102 to, so well over 500 streets are, in the queue for selection under this program. And we do 26 every 6 months. So congratulations, but also I'm sorry that you were selected for this, because it means that there really is an issue that, we are hoping to solve. So a lot of people would like to know specifically how we choose these streets. It's a very data-driven process. That's something that Liz handles a lot of. But essentially, it comes down to these 5 categories: vehicular speeds, volume, vulnerable user injury fatality. So that is like your pedestrians and your cyclists. If they're being struck by cars on the road, that's a pretty serious indicator that there's something to be done. Non-driver accommodations, that means like the sidewalks. Are they there? Are there no sidewalks? We like to consider that just because it is helpful in elevating roads that desperately need something to be done if there's really no other option besides walking in the street. And then finally, that last bit is trip destinations. That's generally parks and schools. So if there are schools nearby or parks where we expect people might be walking at higher volumes than normal, we want to take that into consideration as well. But the largest piece of the pie is really what we're here to work on, and that's vehicular speeds. So we're going to talk about 2 streets tonight. Usually it's just one, but we've combined these because they do crisscross. So Percy Warner Boulevard has an 85th percentile speed of 39. That's not terrible, but not great. I mean, I think we all know that going 40 miles an hour down this road isn't quite appropriate for one that people want to live on and walk around.
Where are you getting that information?
So NDOT does traffic counts. Those measure the volumes and the speeds. It would have been done sometime in the last 2 years. So if it was submitted, do you remember when the application was submitted? If not, it's okay.
I think August of 2022.
Got it. So within the last year or so, NDOT has gone out and gathered that data.
Do they take in consideration that, like during in the school zone part, the speeds would be lower at certain times of the day because there's, crossing, flashing lights and kids crossing, or do they do it? How do they pick the time of day?
So there are procedures for traffic counting that account for essentially all of the factors that might give you a wonky result. Like right now, for instance, we're not doing any counts because school's out. We don't go on holidays. Really, there's a list of days in the year that are considered like normal. We also choose one location along the street that traffic is measured at. So if that were in a school zone, it would be avoided. Yes.
The county's done at the bottom of Percy Warner near 70 or closer up to Vaughn's.
I don't remember specifically where this count was done, but we certainly can look it up. And
Like a wire.
Oh, yeah.
Across the street. Is that where you're getting your information?
if it's out there now, it would have been a different.
Several months ago.
Got it.
Where's that located? It was around in front of our house, which is 945.
Across from me.
Oh, okay, which is further up the hill. Well, usually downhill, people get increasing speed and they get going a lot faster.
I have them coming at 50 and 55. But
Yeah.
I guess the overarching sentiment is that seems low.
Yeah.
Yes.
No doubt.
Mine is low to me.
Well-
I want to, I need
Yes.
to add a piece of information. On your earlier slide about the pedestrian, the percentage,
Yes.
if you are this tall, like a 4-year-old, those percentages go up tremendously. If you're like, Nick here, you're a pedestrian, you're an adult. But if you're a biddy, when I say biddy, I'm an early childhood person.
Mhm.
When you're small, the chances are nil and none.
Yeah.
So I really think you might want to add that to it so that people understand if you are 6 feet tall, these are your chances, or 5'8", these are your chances. But if you are 4 years old, your chances are nil and none.
And age, my age, if I got hit, I might not recover from a broken hip or whatever.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah, I think, 60 and above, and we do have a lot of 60 and above that live on Percy Warner for sure. That walk. Yeah, that walk, yeah.
Yeah. These are all excellent points. And the sentiment that I'm gathering is that most people in here would like us to lower speeds as much as we can.
Absolutely.
That's great news. That's why we're here. Let's see. So we also account for street width. That basically just helps us decide how many cushions we need on a section of street, and if there's any narrowing that needs to be done, we take that into consideration as well. On Vaughn's Gap, this is kind of the opposite situation. We have an 85th percentile speed that's not as high. Now, granted, this is 15% of people who are measured are going faster than this amount, so it's not the average. But certainly there are plenty of outliers here, and they could be going any speed.
What time of day are you doing these tests? Because people going to work every morning are not going 30. They're probably not even doing 39.
That's right.
Well, I live on Vaughn's
Zooming down
Gap,
the road,
and they
so-
had,
That's right.
they had placed the speed indicator where as you drive up, it shows your speed and it tells you what the speed's supposed to be. And that encourages people to slow down because they see they're doing 40 miles an hour. I sat there and watched people. It showed them they were starting out at 40 or 45, and as they get up to the sign, then they slow down. So I think these are percentiles from their data. So it's not 100% accurate, but yes, people on Vaughn's Gap, I've seen them do 50 and 55.
That's absolutely correct.
I think Vaughn's Gap has a stop sign, so that probably helps slow it down.
It does.
You're talking about the four-way spot? Yeah.
People run all the time.
Well,
Right.
I almost got hit there the other day. The kid just came through, didn't even but he was going at least 60.
Yeah. When you're going that kind of speed, a stop sign becomes much less likely to be obeyed because you are, attempting to go from 60 to 0. All that being said, these two streets have been selected. So if a ballot is passed, we will do some sort of vertical measure that is able to lower speed significantly. Should the ballot measure fail, NDOT will likely still do something, but it won't be a vertical item in the middle of the road. So miraculously, even with the data that we've collected here, although it seems to be a different picture than what you all are experiencing, we're going to help out your neighborhood one way or another. And more if we can all encourage each other to vote yes when ballot time comes. High volume on Vaughn's Gap, we think that's generally cutting between the two highways. It seems to be an enticing cut through for people, despite it being a residential road. And it's actually a pretty narrow street at 21 feet. So usually a 10-foot lane is the lowest NDOT is willing to go. And
It used to be wider until Public Works put in sidewalks and narrowed the road.
got it. Well, yeah, I mean,
Knocked down at least 6 times. Yes, part of the Public Works fault on that.
I see. So this is the location. I'm sure we're all familiar. This is a screenshot from NDOT's traffic calming tracker. This is a very helpful tool that's on their website. Streets that are shown in green are ones that have been selected, and we are working through the design process and public engagement to implement traffic calming measures. Purple indicates streets that have applied. So it's kind of a helpful tool if you're looking for other streets around that have applied, maybe some that have been successful. And then we can't see any here, but they also have a blue color where they have been installed. So if anyone hasn't experienced traffic calming measures, you could go on the map and look for a place to see where it's been implemented and, find out what you're getting yourselves into.
Just curious, how often, what's the percentage of bumps, humps, and dips? What's the percentage that Nashville installs of those?
So right now, and I guess that is a question that pertains to the toolkit overall. So we're gonna.
Can you repeat his question?
Yeah, he's asking what percentage of bumps, humps, and dips does NDOT install as part of the traffic calming program? And I can answer that, shortly in much greater detail. Are there any other questions about what we've talked about so far before we move on?
Just to clarify, we have been selected. There will be some measures taken, the timing of which are to be determined based upon a vote on the ballot initiative.
It's not so much the timing, but the character of the measures. So If a ballot passes yes, we will implement everything we're comfortable with to slow cars down. Often that involves speed cushions. If a neighborhood votes no, NDOT is forced to use other options. A radar feedback sign, like you described earlier, might be something. And the idea is those are less intrusive. So the people that vote no, aren't experiencing something that they didn't ask for.
What ballot is this?
We can go ahead and cover that toward the end of the presentation, but essentially NDOT will send out mailers to everyone living on the streets, go online and say, yes or no.
So you don't get a vote if you're not on that street.
That's correct.
If you jog on that street, you get a vote.
You are pointing out a very real issue. What NDOT has found in the past is that the further away from living on a street, the more likely a person is to vote no. So you could imagine all of the people that rely on Vaughn's Gap to, quickly traverse and get to work probably don't have as much to benefit from the speed cushions as the residents might. So I think that I'm optimistic. The procedure we have now is, working in that favor.
If you own a condominium that has an address on the street, you receive a ballot.
Yeah. So essentially what we do with condominium complexes is take the frontage that the complex is within, and they each get ballots.
Not the whole complex.
No, it depends on how they parcel out their land. Essentially, we use Metro's, mailing toolkit to generate these ballots. We do a, QC to make sure. But essentially, yes, a condo complex that is adjacent to a street, those condos will get a say.
Which are none.
I don't exactly know what is condos and what's not, but there are some developments in nearby that did qualify for that.
Oh, all right.
Usually we don't see votes for people that don't show up to the meetings. They're, often the condo owners are not quite as engaged. So anyway, yes.
Oh, I was just wondering, does the actual condo have to be on the street or their drive to pull into the condo?
The parcel of land which their condo building exists in, if that parcel is adjacent to the public right of way in question, they will get invitations and ballots.
Yeah, the building they're all back. They're not on Vaughn's Gap at all.
Well, the address is Vaughn's Gap.
Yeah, their address is Vaughn's Gap.
They're on both Vaughn's Gap and Percy.
Yeah, there are some.
We did send many invitations out for this meeting. A lot of them were condos in that complex. So
And apartments, they're not considered.
So yeah, the way apartments work is the owner of a particular property gets one invitation and one ballot. So the owner of an apartment complex would get a vote, but if it had 1,000 people in it, that one owner of the building would vote.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Of course.
So when you're saying speed hump, is that just a general term to the different variations of a speed hump?
I'm glad you asked. I think we can take that as an invitation to move on to a detailed explanation of such things. So I'm sure most people have seen these around. These are called speed cushions. They're essentially the same concept as a speed bump, but they've been elongated to essentially target a speed of around 20 miles an hour, where a speed bump, you find those in like grocery store parking lots, places that are really more appropriate for like 5 to 10. So if you drive over these 20 miles an hour, you're actually going to be okay. If y'all don't mind giving me just a second, I got a low battery notification, so I'm going to make sure this power is working. Mm-hmm.
Maybe hit the red button. Is the red button on?
The red button is on. I'm worried I might turn the TV off if I do that. Why don't I plug into the wall over here?
Yes, you can also use mine too.
Now, you know what? We can get this guy out for it. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, it says I'm plugged in. Thank you all for bearing with me.
No problem, David.
So speed cushion designs essentially are meant to be the best of both worlds. It is a speed bump, but it is longer, larger, more comfortable to traverse at streets on speeds you might be using on streets. NDOT will also do speed tables. These are much more occasional. The reason being, emergency vehicles, fire, ambulances, they don't have the ability to kind of dodge them, where speed cushions, essentially with the wider wheelbase, they'll just aim right for the center of that arrow and generally aren't affected as much as smaller cars. Any questions about those two?
So how do we know if we're going to be on a speed table or cushion?
It's a good question. Essentially, speed tables will have these two arrows. Speed cushions will generally have one.
But I mean, like,
Who decides?
Are you gonna make a recommendation?
Oh, I see. Yeah, absolutely. So
They're gonna make a recommendation at the end of their presentation.
yeah, that's correct. I can't answer now. We're recommending speed cushions because this is a route that we want to keep open for emergency vehicles should they ever need to use it. This is a slide about how they actually work. So NDOT has put in some time to studying streets before and after, how much people are slowing down. We can see that the average speed where cushions were installed went from 31 to 22. It's pretty good. And then that 85th percentile, those are really kind of the upper tier of people who are speeding usually on the streets. Even that was reduced from 37 to 25 across the 6 streets that were studied. All that is to say, NDOT is confident that these actually do work in slowing cars down, partly because there's really no choice in the matter. Speed limits. Yeah, exactly. So the signs and stop signs and speed limits, paint on the road is all easy to ignore if you're motivated to, whereas speed cushions are a physical solution that everyone is forced to face. We do have a number of other tricks up our sleeve, though they're not as relevant to this particular set of design, unless, of course, you all feel strongly otherwise. We have radar feedback signs. We've kind of talked about these already. They essentially are a speed limit sign that takes a radar reading and tells you how fast you're going. So often we'll implement these on streets where speed cushions are not wanted, or in areas where speed cushions are not able to be installed. So on really curvy areas or areas that are excessively steep, we're not able to do speed cushions because they don't work the same way they were designed. So we can kind of use these to fill in gaps where needed. Talked a little bit about narrowing already. So I think Percy Warner Boulevard is actually an example of where this has been done in an extreme case, but essentially the principle that it's addressing is the effect where one may be enticed to drive faster than they intend if they're more comfortable, going at a higher speed. So wide lanes, long straight roads, those are all factors that kind of subconsciously affect a driver's tendency to speed, even if it's not really what they came out to do. We probably won't do either of those things. One, because Percy Warner Boulevard has it already. And Vaughn's Gap, as we discussed already, is about as narrow as we would want to go with that street. In really rare cases, we'll consider traffic circles. We don't have any intersections here where I think that is quite doable, and that has a lot to do with pavement widths and what pavement is already there. So you may imagine if we were to put a traffic circle in, it'd be pretty difficult to make a left turn around it, especially in those larger vehicles. And then finally, we have bulb outs and chicanes. So we don't need to spend too much time on these, but essentially they're to address intersections where turning movements at fast speeds are like a real primary concern. So if we had crosswalks that were, seemingly dangerous for sight distance issues, things like that, we would be able to put a bulb out in, kind of shrink the intersection to a size where you need to slow down to a slower speed and able to make the turns. Yes.
Fast number of chicanes, and I've seen it in Europe a lot, where you go to an intersection, they put like a zigzag paint.
Yeah, exactly.
All that does is kind of makes people wonder what the heck's going on. Slow down, they have a natural slow down intersections. I didn't know if that was possible to add, like, Percy Warner, there's 2 or 3 intersections on the street that aren't 4-way stops, but I wonder if stuff like that could help just slow people down when they came to an intersection, past those intersections.
That's interesting. I don't know if that's something that NDOT does currently. I have seen it, so I know.
I've seen it in Nashville. So
Yeah. No, I've seen it as well.
Question also, are we gonna get some crosswalks identified?
That's a great
Something
question.
to consider?
So usually crosswalks don't fall into the domain of things that achieve like the traffic calming goal.
Right.
It's absolutely feedback we can accept and communicate to NDOT. What will often help with that is if it's accompanied by one or particularly like a series of Hub Nashville requests for similar crosswalks, because that does ultimately go to a different group than the one that we work directly with, and they'll make that decision.
I'm very familiar with that.
I'm so glad, because we've got a whole slide about it that I'm sure you'll know all about. But yeah, that does raise a good point. These are the tools that we have at our disposal to accomplish a pretty narrow goal, but there are tons of things that NDOT does and several different avenues to communicate problems. Yes.
Our council person recommended a striped lane down Percy Warner where people could walk and cycle down Percy Warner.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of a major highway for kids to get to the JCC, to get to school.
Yeah.
My son had an accident on Percy Warner. He was on his bike, and without a striped lane, people would just throw their brush in the paved shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And he was headed for this brush pile and was going to go out into traffic and look behind him, and there was a car coming. And luckily, he didn't get hit by a car, but he hit that brush pile and came home all scratched up. So I'm glad that he got scratched instead of killed. But I think it would be great to have a striped lane down Percy Warner. I think it'd be appropriate. There's plenty of width, and our council person recommended it at our last neighborhood meeting. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, honestly, I'm with you. First of all, so sorry to hear about your son. That's never fun, no matter how severe the injuries are, but thank goodness he's okay. So bikeways and sidewalks are actually their own program within NDOT. They do accept feedback. So I've got a contact, Anna Dearman. Her information will be on a future slide. Would definitely recommend getting in touch with them. And essentially what that would be doing is adding another stripe on the outside of the existing one. Is that right?
Yeah, either one or two sides.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be appropriate. There's plenty of width there.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's one of the streets where it would be, much easier than most to implement. I agree. That does, well, do we have questions about the traffic calming devices so far? Cool. So as I mentioned before, outside the NSTC program, there are a number of arms of NDOT that do a lot of different things. Hub Nashville is really the catch-all. So stop signs, crosswalks, broken equipment, really anything can go through this and it'll find a way to get to the appropriate person. Walk and bike, as I mentioned earlier, Anna Dearman, she's the walking and biking manager. Her email is here. She can be reached about the status of specific bikeway projects, whether or not it's in the current walk and bike plan, or if there are recommendations for amending it. And finally, J.D. Lane, the commissioner coordinator of the Beautification Commission, can handle things like adopting a street, community service, neighborhood cleanups, that sort of thing. Anyone need to take pictures or?
Information going to be sent out or sent out for?
It'll be online.
Yeah, absolutely. We are recording this meeting and we'll post it onto NDOT's website. if you went onto NDOT's website looking for this specifically, you'd probably find it before the recording because they keep it all pretty accessible. Did we have a question in the back? Cool. So now we're going to talk about, yes.
With the Walk and Bike and the Beautification Commission, is the timeline after taking feedback similar to what NDOT demonstrated here? I mean, if we were to start covering them with requests, I'm looking at a year, 2 years potentially for some type of movement on that.
I think I don't have as much insight onto the mechanics of those two programs and their requests as I do on this one, but I believe it is a similar situation. We've got a large county and a lot of need for such things.
Just as a quick follow-up, had a previous request already been issued for those, saving us the trouble, would be able to identify that, or we need to speak to them directly?
As far as requests go, I don't think so. We can view all of the streets in Nashville's sidewalk plan and bike plan online. If you were to find the traffic calming interactive map, they have similar ones for those programs. That
add a note also, District 23 has a beautification chair, Patricia Knight, and if you go to Tom Druppel's website, you can probably find her information. She's been involved in neighborhood cleanups, getting trees out. She's now involved in putting bird houses out in the neighborhood along trails. So you can contact her also and find out. She might have some insight on the requests that are out there.
Sure, where we are in the process, and some requests had already been made previously.
I have a question. I think Vicki brought it up. When you look at the map, Percy Warner is the main hub. I mean, it's basically 2 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
And I live right in the middle. It's 1 mile to that stoplight and 1 mile to Vaughn's Gap. And I live right in the middle. What happens is there are four streets that come on to Percy Warner. Is there any way that we could get persons like the Dooleys who live on that side on Percy Drive because they're interested, and people on Edward Warner would be interested, people on State would be interested, people on Nahoff would be all of them would be interested, because the only way they can get out of their house to where they want to go is to come to Percy Warner. Or they could cut over, go to Vaughn's Gap, but most of them come straight out. My point is, they would be interested. Could we encourage those persons that live on those streets, even though they don't have a vote, they still can call or talk or write to Tom and say, this is, we live on this street, which intersects with Percy Warner, and we're very interested in having the speed bump or this or that or whatever. Is there something that we as persons could do some public interest or knock on doors and ask people to write?
We can post on the Warner Park Facebook page.
Well, that's true. But again, a lot of people don't even, I'm not going to say they don't know about it, but that would be part of what we could say to them. For you to stay informed about what we're doing, be sure you're on the Warner Parks Association website. And can we do things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Any and all advocacy that you all want to do as part of working towards this vote is encouraged. By all means, post this video to your neighborhood Facebook page, really wherever you think people are going to see it. It sounds like we understand that people who aren't living on these streets won't directly have a say, but absolutely they can knock on doors and explain why they feel that they do or don't need it. The world is your oyster in that respect, and really great. If we're ready to move on, what we can do is talk about the specific designs. Let's go ahead and do it. So this is an overall map. this is by far the largest project that's been selected in the set, basically combining two of the longer roads in the project. Usually this fits on one page, but we have four. So if we are, I'll give it a second to take a picture. But yeah, essentially, we're adjacent to Percy Warner Park for the most part. There's also a school. This is the community center. We're in here. And then I think these are the condo complexes. This one and some of these that. Yeah. Yeah. I'll share that this is definitely the largest mailing list for any of these meetings that we sent out. So many people were invited. We'll just go through these one by one. They're all very similar, as we'll see. These are speed cushions. This probably looks like a lot relative to other streets you've seen, but essentially, NDOT's design guidelines are based on the FHWA, that's the Federal Highway Association, for how to place these in a way that they're effective. And they basically provide a range of 400 feet to 600 feet as the appropriate spacing. If you place them too close together, what you have is a lot of frustrated people who are having to drive over more cushions than necessary, and you're spending money that isn't really doing much. If you space them further apart than that, what tends to happen is people will slow down for the cushions, but they have plenty of opportunity to then speed up before they get to the next one. So that's generally what guides that range. I placed these at like 550 feet apart. So if anyone feels strongly, or enough of us feel strongly one way or another, we can collect feedback about this design and take it into account as we do our final plans. We do have these meetings so that we can hear from you and, discern what different neighbors want. Yes.
Will those continue up through the JCC and then on Percy Warner all the way up to the end of the highway again?
Yes, that is. Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at when I said we needed to split this into a few pages.
And I mean in front of the Kiva School.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. This is Vaughn's Gap again. Similar situation. Yep. And then you can kind of see we tried to place speed cushions closer than 400 feet to that stop sign because it is something that we recognize. Not everyone stops at it. So generally we like to make sure they're going slow enough when they arrive at the stop sign that they're not tempted to just blow on through. And then finally, Percy Warner Boulevard's a similar situation. So what we need to do is go out and take some measurements. We've got a set of parameters where we're allowed to install speed cushions. I believe there's some hills along Percy Warner, so that'll likely adjust the placement of these. We can't place cushions on any grade steeper than like 6 or 7%.
Pretty steep.
Yeah. Right. So that's a process we're gonna do some field work and check everything, make sure these are placed appropriately. We don't just slap them down. But
how does that work in front of somebody's house, like in their front of their driveway?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. Another parameter that we have while we place these is we do not like to put cushions any closer than like 15 or 20 feet to someone's driveway. And that's enough room to make like a big, backwards turnout and do everything you need to do. Yeah, we do. So we have speed cushion warning signs that we'll place basically on either side of the road. It kind of depends how your street network looks when we do those. Like if there was 4 in a row and you couldn't possibly get to the middle without doing the first one, we'll say a set of speed cushions is ahead versus signing like every single speed cushion. I imagine we'll probably have a good amount of that on these streets since you do have pretty large lengths between cross streets, but essentially everyone who goes over a speed cushion will have been warned before they go over it. We find that's a pretty important piece, not to surprise anyone, because nobody likes going over these at whatever speed they may have been going otherwise. But that's all we have on the concept designs. Do we have any other questions before we move on? Yes.
I think one great thing about these cushions is, and because of the way the roadway is 170, is this will really not only will it slow traffic down, but I think it'll really make cutting through and just
Amen.
it'll slow down,
Amen.
limit the amount of traffic going through our neighborhood, which is what we want also.
Yeah, absolutely. So NDOT does not seek diverting traffic around to other places deliberately by installing traffic calming. It will add, obviously, a great amount of friction to using your street as if it were Harding Pike or Highway 100.
I think people are using our street a lot of times because there's school zones on Harding Pike and Highway 7.
Oh, really?
Too, and I think they somehow see that as a quicker way of avoiding the school zone.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. You're probably right. I didn't realize there were.
Well, there,
Well, what do you call it? The St. Henry's has a school zone, which you don't have it on the map. It's by at the end of Vaughn's Gap.
Mhm.
The Harding, there's a school zone right there. So I think people will make a right, or they'll at the top of the hill they'll get on Percy Warner and take it all the way down. Plus, but yeah, it seems to be what.
living on Vaughn's Gap, I see 18-wheelers loaded with steel, with brick, with 2x4s, an entire flatbed loaded. I see dump trucks loaded to the hill, hauling a flatbed with a big excavator on it. So they're destroying the pavement on our streets. And so I'm hoping this will deter them, because all they're doing is cutting through because they're going to some job somewhere. They're not doing a job in the neighborhood.
That is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, hopefully this is a good way to deter them. I don't really think there's much we could do that would be more disruptive to that than speed cushions in the road.
Yes, there is.
Please.
I went out in the middle of the street and stopped a truck and told him to back up into Edmund Warner and go out the way he was supposed to go, which was Highway 100. I said, do not come down my street. And the man did, yes, ma'am. And he backed a dump. That's when they were building those condos.
Can you stand out there all day?
Well, it just irritated me. This is when they were building those condos behind the, what do you call it there, the stoplight. I have two questions.
Yes.
Now, I realize there'll be the speed bumps, but now you do consider oncoming traffic. In other words, those 4 streets that come out onto Percy Warner. In other words, there won't be like a speed bump right there where one is intersecting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
So we'll
right.
place these
And then
with
I
that
had
in
a second
mind.
question, and I can't remember what it was.
Yes.
It'll come back.
You personally designed this,
Yes.
and you're in the data gathering stage of this design, or are you?
That's correct.
So this is pretty rough as far as what you're expecting?
Yes.
Based upon your general observations in the standard. When do you plan on collecting that information, or the next stages to really kind of file down this design in order to make it probably the most polished?
Yeah. So essentially what happens next, and I can move to this slide while we talk through that. We have this meeting to basically see what everyone thinks, identify any particular issues that we may not have known about before, and then we'll do a design that takes into account all of the grades of the road, all of the specific street widths, verify some of the information that we gathered online, things like that. And then we'll produce a set of construction plans, essentially. What happens with those is we'll come back, have meeting number 2, and we can all take a look at the construction plans that we have produced. Maybe follow up on some of the issues that we discussed here tonight.
What's the usual timeline between meetings?
Somewhere between 8 and 10 weeks. After that, all right. So after meeting 2, that'll be, in the neighborhood of 8 to 10 weeks from now. If there's nothing else to follow up on, so no like major changes are identified, we'll have that online ballot. So similar to the postcards we got to attend this meeting, we'll get postcards announcing the ballot. Everyone will get a unique code that belongs to them and them only. And you can go on NDOT and submit yes or no. Or you can not go on to NDOT and you don't vote.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think a lot of people in Percy Warner would like what's happening, but also will be distressed if one of the signs is put in their front yard, which means, boom, there's a speed bump 10 feet ahead of you, and that sign is in your front yard. How do you sway people into those thinking if the sign is in front of the...
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, I know.
So where possible, and I think that this is a good example of a neighborhood where it is well within our capabilities, we'll try to place signs in spots that make sense. Often that'll be in front of a utility pole or perhaps on the boundary between two properties. So it's not like blocking anyone's sidewalk or house. Yes, right. That is a strategy that is often used to basically disincentivize people from driving around the speed cushions into people's yards. If we do see that happening, what we'll probably do is go a little light on the signs at first to avoid that very thing. We don't want to oversign because it is distressing to people and not usually necessary. If, however, we find that folks are like driving into people's yards to get around cushions, which we usually don't see a lot of, but it has happened, a sign can be placed and usually deter that pretty well.
Thank you.
Yes. Oh, please.
Do institutions get a vote, and is it one vote?
Yeah, schools and churches, as of recently, actually, will get one vote if their property parcel is on the on that right of way we're talking about.
Is it going to go? Is the owner of the property or a renter that lives on that property get the vote?
It is always the owner. Yes.
So I see on your online ballot statistics, 66% favorable votes equals success. That means it'll pass and then go forward with the project.
Yes.
That's available votes or votes that would participate?
Votes that participated.
So an absentee vote would be saying because no one cared.
Exactly. Yeah. Otherwise, all of them would fail. I promise. Yes.
I volunteer my front door.
That's very kind of you.
I love it. 9:14.
I drive over 4 speed humps on the way to my work, and I've never noticed them looking unsightly or where people have driven around them. They don't annoy me because they're not ka-chunk. I just slow down a little and ka-chunk over and go on. I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Breslin, close to Charlotte.
Breslin?
On Breslin.
Oh, got it. So we can take any further questions. Yes.
So how do you make the determination between using the plastic speed bumps versus asphalt permanent? Because now we run the risk of people who aren't here raising a voice and complaining, and then NDOT coming back around and just pulling the stakes out of the ground. There goes the speed bump.
Oh, got it. Yeah, that's a good question. Currently, NDOT relies very heavily on the plastic speed cushions. They are pretty permanent. There's like 50 bolts that secure each of those, and they are fairly resolved in their commitment to place them where the whole process has been followed and every resident of the street does want it. So I would be shocked if residents who don't live here voiced enough of a concern that they actually did take them out.
Is there a process for that?
Like requesting speed cushions?
Reversal of a traffic calming area.
Oh,
To see, so say for instance, there was some disgruntled neighbors, they were seeking to reverse the decision later, 5-6 years down the line. Is there like a functional process that NDOT has for that?
that's a great question. Besides Hub Nashville, I don't think so. Like you could submit, hundreds of Hub Nashville requests. If they're all coming from the same person, that's pretty easy to figure out.
So say it'd be highly unlikely that if this was put to completion, it would be
I really don't think there's a high likelihood that it could be undone unless there was,
A real groundswell.
yeah, exactly. But even then, like, we're all here, we're getting the information we need, we're all going to, vote. So that's kind of the strategy NDOT has taken to ensure that it is something that the neighborhood as a whole does want. Yes. That's a great question. I don't believe we do. Certainly we can request.
Asphalt, just for aesthetic.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. They're ones that NDOT just does not want to have in its tool belt. It's a lot more, standardized, I guess, is as well as cost efficient to use this particular product. And we've got a contractor that basically can do it with their eyes closed at this point. Yes.
Percy Warner's wide enough, I think, where the striped shoulder, someone can simply drive around a ramp that's in the road. What are you gonna do to keep that?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. So I've actually done this part of the design already. We're going to put speed cushions across the whole width. So even if it's a parking lane, we make sure that there's no more than a 4-foot gap between any one thing that someone will have to go over.
So if you're on a bike and you're on the shoulder, you can drive.
They're gonna have an open for a bike.
Yeah, it'll be probably like 3 feet between the cushion and the gutter. That's enough for most cyclists, and really, like, I bike over these all the time. It's not a huge deal to traverse them, unless you are going like 30, then it's pretty. Yes.
We can continue our meeting, excuse me.
Oh, thank you so much for checking.
Until 8 o'clock. I went out to check.
I appreciate it.
We don't need that much time, but we don't have to shut down right now.
Yeah, we're here as long as you all have information that you want to know.
Will the speed limit be reduced to 25 miles per hour?
I don't think so. There is a way to request a speed limit reduction. That's not the traffic calming program, and that's really basically just a rule that NDOT and I think a broader federal agency has, that traffic calming should not be accomplished by speed limit reduction. There are plenty of reasons to reduce the speed limit, so that request can be made through Hub Nashville, and the more the merrier.
Hub Nashville really responsive. A lot of people said we like this reduced. They would.
That amplifies it for sure. If there are no more questions, Gil Thomas, he's the program manager with NDOT. I work with him all the time. My name is David Greaves, work with Kimley Horn with NDOT. But thank you all very much for your time. This was great to collect all of your helpful feedback. And I think we've got a good design on our hands that we'll get some plans drawn up for you.
I also want to thank everybody for coming out. And when we get to meeting number 2, please try to encourage others to come out. Like I said, I know they mailed out hundreds of postcards, but we really need people here to know what's going on, to be able to vote, et cetera, and just to be involved, be informed of what's happening. I also didn't mention at the beginning, Tom Druffel, our councilman, who did plan to be here, but he got terribly sick this afternoon and went home. He sent me a text and said to apologize, he could not be here. And thank you, NDOT, very much. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you, Carol Rayleigh.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think it's safe to say that I'm probably like the youngest here, and I'm kind of ashamed, not ashamed, but disappointed in my other peers, but families aren't here.
I'm very disappointed.
I was